A poor student tutored a struggling kid for free, not realizing she's the principal's daughter. The words looped through Marcus Reed's mind as he sat on the cold metal bench outside Westridge Community College's financial aid office, clutching a rejection letter that trembled in his hands. The December wind whistled through the poorly sealed windows, matching the hollow feeling expanding in his chest. His scholarship had been reduced again, and the part-time job at the campus bookstore wouldn't cover the difference. 22 years old with threadbare jeans and a secondhand coat that had seen better days, Marcus stared at the paper until the typed words blurred. 3 semesters left until his teaching degree. So close, yet suddenly impossibly far. Mr. Reed? The financial aid counselor, Mrs. Herrera, poked her head out from her office. Her eyes were kind but resolute. I'm sorry, but there's nothing more we can do this term. Perhaps another loan? I can't. Marcus folded the letter carefully, his movements deliberate, controlled, hiding the tremor in his fingers. Thank you for trying. Outside, the late afternoon sky hung heavy with impending snow. Marcus pulled his coat tighter, the frayed cuffs brushing against his wrists. His apartment was 15 blocks away, but the bus fare was a luxury he could no longer afford. The walk would give him time to think, to find another solution. There had to be one. There always was. His phone buzzed, his sister Layla checking in from her nursing shift. He couldn't tell her about this setback. Not when she had sent him half her last paycheck, insisting he use it for textbooks. Not when she believed in him so fiercely it sometimes hurt to breathe under the weight of her expectations. Marcus typed back a quick, "all good," before pocketing the phone. The lie sat uncomfortably in his stomach. The university library loomed ahead, warm light spilling from its windows. Without conscious thought, his feet carried him inside. The library had become his sanctuary, the place where he escaped the cramped apartment he shared with 2 other struggling students, where the heating worked intermittently at best. He nodded to Miss Chen, the librarian who knew him by name now, and headed to his usual spot in the back corner. Surrounded by books, Marcus could forget the growling in his stomach, the holes in his socks, the constant mathematical equations running through his head. How to stretch $20 for a week's groceries, how many tutoring hours he would need to cover next month's rent. His tutoring flyers hadn't garnered much interest. Most college students couldn't afford his already discounted rates, and the wealthy ones preferred the official tutoring center with its credentials and fancy letterhead. Marcus pulled out his laptop, a gift from Layla 3 birthdays ago, and opened his resume. Maybe another job, something early morning before classes, or late night, or, excuse me. He looked up to find a young girl standing uncertainly at his table, 12, maybe 13 years old, with unruly brown hair tucked half-heartedly behind her ears and a purple backpack clutched against her chest like armor. The librarian said you might be able to help me, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I saw your tutoring flyer. Marcus straightened, immediately shifting into the persona he'd been cultivating since his first education class. Approachable, confident, professional. That's right. What subject? Math. And maybe science. She didn't meet his eyes, instead focusing on a point just past his shoulder. But I don't have much money. Something in her posture, the slight curve of her shoulders, the way she seemed to be trying to disappear into herself, resonated with him. He'd seen that look in the mirror too many times. Have a seat, he said, moving his backpack to make room. I'm Marcus. Ellie. She slid cautiously into the chair opposite him. So, Ellie, what kind of math are we talking about? She unzipped her backpack and pulled out a battered textbook. Pre-algebra. We have a test Friday, and I don't understand any of it. Her voice caught slightly. If I fail again, my mom's going to... She trailed off, blinking rapidly. Marcus recognized the look of someone trying desperately not to cry in public. He'd perfected that skill years ago, after his father left and his mother started working double shifts. Hey, it's okay, he said softly. Math can be tricky, but once you get the foundations, it starts making sense. Promise. Ellie looked unconvinced but opened her textbook to a page bristling with dog ears and highlighted sections. Let's start here, Marcus suggested, pointing to a simple equation. Can you tell me what you know about solving for X? For the next hour, Marcus guided Ellie through the basics, watching her confusion gradually transform into cautious understanding. She was bright, remarkably so, but something was blocking her comprehension. Anxiety, perhaps. Or maybe just a teacher who moved too quickly through the material. When the library announced it would be closing in 15 minutes, Ellie looked up with alarm. I have to go. My mom will be waiting. She began stuffing papers into her backpack. "We made good progress," Marcus said encouragingly. "But you could probably use another session before your test." Ellie bit her lip. "How much would it cost?" Marcus hesitated. His standard rate was $20 per hour, already lower than most tutors. Money he desperately needed. But the hope in Ellie's eyes, previously so dull and resigned, made something twist inside him. "For now, let's call this a free trial session," he heard himself say. "If you want to continue, we can figure something out." "Really?" The smile that broke across her face was like sunrise. "Could we meet tomorrow? Same time?" "Sure." Marcus wrote his phone number on a scrap of paper and handed it to her. "Text me if anything changes." As Ellie hurried out of the library, Marcus stared at the space she'd left behind. The logical part of his brain was screaming at him. He couldn't afford to give away free tutoring. Not now. But something about the girl's determined concentration, the way her entire body had relaxed when she finally solved an equation correctly, it reminded him why he wanted to be a teacher in the first place. One free session, maybe two, just until she passed her test. Then he would figure out something else. Outside, the snow had started falling, large flakes drifting lazily through the glow of the streetlights. Marcus pulled his coat tighter and began the long walk home, his breath clouding in front of him. For the first time that day, the weight on his shoulders felt slightly lighter. The next afternoon, Ellie arrived 5 minutes early, clutching her math book in a small paper bag. "I brought cookies," she announced, placing the bag on the table. "My mom made them." The simple gesture caught Marcus off guard. When was the last time someone had brought him something? "Thank you," he said, genuinely touched. "That's really nice of you both." The cookies were homemade chocolate chips, still slightly warm. Marcus tried not to eat them too quickly, savoring both the sweetness and the unexpected kindness. Ellie watched him eat with transparent satisfaction before opening her textbook. "I did the practice problems you showed me," she said, pushing a paper toward him. "I think I got most of them right." Marcus reviewed her work, impressed by the improvement from just one session. "These are great, Ellie. You missed a couple, but look how many you got right." "You're getting it." The smile that lit her face made his decision instantly clear. He would tutor this kid for free as long as she needed help. Something about her reminded him of himself at that age. Smart but unsure, determined but easily discouraged. Over the next 3 weeks, they settled into a routine. 3 afternoons a week, they would meet at the library for an hour. Ellie brought occasional treats. Cookies, once a thermos of hot chocolate, another time a sandwich wrapped carefully in wax paper that tasted better than anything Marcus had eaten in months. He suspected it was her lunch, saved for him, but he didn't mention it, understanding the pride behind the gesture. For his part, Marcus brought his full attention and the teaching techniques he'd been learning in his education courses. He created custom worksheets for Ellie, finding real-world applications for abstract mathematical concepts. When she mentioned loving horses, he rewrote problems to include stables and riding times. When science became their focus, he borrowed a friend's microscope for an afternoon, showing her the invisible world in a drop of pond water. Ellie's grades improved dramatically. The C on her first test became a B+ on the second, and when she burst into the library clutching a math quiz with a bright red A circled at the top, Marcus felt a surge of pride that rivaled anything he'd experienced from his own achievements. "My teacher couldn't believe it," Ellie said, breathless with excitement. "She said I should consider the advanced track next year if I keep this up." "You absolutely should," Marcus agreed. "You have a natural aptitude for this, Ellie. You just needed to build your confidence." Something flickered across her face, a shadow of her former insecurity. "It's only because you're a good teacher," she said quietly. "Before, I thought I was just stupid." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "Hey," he said firmly, waiting until she met his eyes. "You are not stupid. Not even close. Don't ever let anyone make you think that, including yourself." Ellie nodded, but Marcus could see she wasn't entirely convinced. This was about more than math. In their sessions, he had pieced together fragments of Ellie's life. A recent move to the city, a new school where she knew no one, a mother who worked long hours at the local university. No mention of a father. The parallels to his own childhood were striking. What had started as a simple tutoring arrangement had evolved into something more meaningful. Marcus found himself looking forward to their sessions, planning lessons specifically with Ellie's interests in mind, celebrating her victories as if they were his own. She was no longer just a student, but someone he genuinely cared about. A bright, curious kid who deserved every opportunity. January turned to February. The scholarship rejection faded to a background worry as Marcus picked up 2 weekend shifts at a local coffee shop. It wasn't enough, but it would help. He continued tutoring Ellie, refusing the money she occasionally offered, accepting only the homemade snacks and her growing confidence as payment. Then one snowy afternoon, everything changed. Marcus arrived at the library to find Ellie already at their usual table, but she wasn't alone. A woman sat beside her, elegantly dressed in a charcoal suit, her dark hair pulled back into a neat bun. Even from a distance, Marcus could see the resemblance between them. The same determined set of the jaw, the same thoughtful eyes. "Marcus," Ellie waved him over, excitement written across her face. "This is my mom. She wanted to meet you." The woman stood, extending her hand. "Eleanor Matthews," she said, her voice warm but formal. "I've heard so much about you from Ellie. I wanted to thank you personally for the remarkable change in her academic performance." Marcus shook her hand, suddenly conscious of his worn jeans and faded sweater. "It's been my pleasure. Ellie's a great student. So I've recently discovered." There was a hint of regret in her tone. "Her teacher contacted me last week about her progress. She mentioned Ellie had been receiving tutoring." She paused, studying Marcus with an intensity that made him slightly uncomfortable. "What I couldn't understand was why I hadn't received any invoices." Marcus shifted his weight. "We had an arrangement. Free tutoring, Mrs. Matthews said flatly. 3 times a week for nearly a month." "Why?" The question caught him off guard. How could he explain the instinctive connection he'd felt with Ellie? How her determination reminded him of his sister, of himself. How teaching her had become the brightest spot in his increasingly difficult weeks. "Ellie needed help," he said simply. "I'm studying to be a teacher." It was good practice. Mrs. Matthews' expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Ellie, would you mind giving us a few minutes? Maybe check if that science book you wanted is available?" Ellie looked between them uncertainly but nodded and headed toward the shelves. Once she was out of earshot, Mrs. Matthews gestured for Marcus to sit. "Mr. Reed." "Marcus, please." "Marcus, I appreciate your generosity, but I can't allow you to continue tutoring my daughter without compensation. Particularly not when I've learned about your situation." Marcus stiffened. "My situation?" "Ellie mentioned you're working multiple jobs while attending college. She's very observant." Mrs. Matthews smiled slightly. "She noticed the holes in your shoes 3 weeks ago. The fact that you never buy anything from the cafe. The way you sometimes pocket the cookies she brings for later." Heat crept up Marcus's neck. He hadn't realized how transparent he'd been. "What you may not know," Mrs. Matthews continued, "is that I'm the principal at Westridge University's Education Department." The words hit Marcus like a bucket of ice water. Westridge University, the very place where he was studying. The principal. He had been tutoring the principal's daughter for weeks without knowing it. He began, then stopped, unsure what to say. "I've reviewed your academic record," she said. "It's impressive. Your professors speak highly of your potential as an educator. What they don't know, what I didn't know until recently, is the financial hardship you've been facing." Marcus's pride warred with embarrassment. "With all due respect, Mrs. Matthews, my financial situation is my concern." Normally, I would agree. She folded her hands on the table. "But when you're providing a valuable service to my daughter while struggling to stay in school yourself, it becomes a matter I can't ignore." From her briefcase, she produced a folder. "The university has a teaching fellows program, full tuition, a modest stipend, and guaranteed student teaching placement upon completion. It's typically reserved for graduate students, but exceptions can be made in extraordinary circumstances." She slid the folder toward him. "I'd like you to apply." Marcus stared at the folder, his mind racing. "Why?" "Because what you've done for Ellie goes beyond tutoring. You've restored her confidence. You've shown her that learning can be a joy, not a burden." Her professional demeanor slipped slightly, revealing the mother beneath. "Do you know she wants to be a math teacher now? My daughter, who 2 months ago was hiding failed tests and crying over homework." Marcus looked toward the bookshelves where Ellie was pretending to browse while obviously trying to eavesdrop. Something warm unfurled in his chest. "She's a natural," he said quietly. "She just needed someone to believe in her." "Yes." Mrs. Matthews followed his gaze. "Sometimes that's all any of us need." She pushed the folder closer. "The application deadline is next Friday. I would be happy to provide a recommendation, and I believe Professor Sanderson would as well." Marcus's hand hovered over the folder. The opportunity was beyond anything he could have hoped for, but a question nagged at him. "Did you arrange for Ellie to find me?" "At the library?" Mrs. Matthews looked surprised, then laughed softly. "No. That was entirely coincidental. Or perhaps fate, if you believe in such things. I had no idea Ellie was being tutored until her teacher mentioned it. Her expression grew serious again. I came today fully prepared to pay you for your time and apologize for my daughter's presumption. I did not expect to find the most promising teaching student in our program working for cookies. Marcus finally allowed himself to touch the folder, to open it and scan the first page of the application. His throat tightened at the figures listed under financial support. And Ellie? He asked, if I apply for this, if I get it, can I still tutor her? I was hoping you would want to, Mrs. Matthews said, and for the first time, her professional facade completely dissolved. She would be devastated to lose you now. From across the library, Ellie caught his eye and gave a small, hopeful wave. Marcus waved back, a decision crystallizing in his mind. Thank you, he said simply. I'll apply. The weeks that followed passed in a blur. Marcus continued tutoring Ellie, now with her mother's blessing and proper compensation. He submitted his application to the Teaching Fellows program, supported by glowing recommendations from Mrs. Matthews and 2 of his professors. He quit one of his weekend jobs, using the extra time to prepare for the interview. In early March, the acceptance letter arrived. Marcus read it 3 times before believing it was real. Full tuition coverage, a stipend that would allow him to focus on his studies, a path forward that had seemed impossible just months ago. His first call was to Layla, who screamed with joy and promised to frame the letter. His second was to Ellie. Does this mean you'll be at my school next year? She asked excitedly when he explained the student teaching component. Mom says she could request you for the 8th grade math classes. That would be amazing, Marcus admitted. But I think that might be a conflict of interest now, since we're friends. The word felt right, more accurate than tutor and student. They had moved beyond that relationship, creating something based on mutual respect and genuine care. We'll figure something out, he promised. I'm not going anywhere. On a bright April afternoon, Marcus sat in the university courtyard, watching students hurry between classes. The cherry trees were in bloom, delicate pink petals drifting through the air like snowflakes. His new laptop, purchased with the first installment of his fellowship stipend, was open to a lesson plan he was developing for his teaching practicum. Is this seat taken? He looked up to find Mrs. Matthews, Eleanor, as she'd asked him to call her outside professional settings, standing by the bench. Please, he gestured to the space beside him. She sat, smoothing her skirt. I wanted to give you an update on Ellie's progress. She received the highest score in her class on the standardized assessment last week. Pride bloomed in Marcus's chest. That's fantastic. She worked so hard. She has a good teacher. Eleanor smiled. Which brings me to my other reason for finding you. The middle school has an opening for a math enrichment program this summer. 6 weeks, decent pay, valuable experience. I thought you might be interested. Absolutely, Marcus said without hesitation. That sounds perfect. Good. I've already submitted your name. She handed him a business card with contact information. The principal is expecting your call. As she stood to leave, she paused. You know, when Ellie first mentioned a college student was tutoring her for free, I was suspicious. In my experience, people rarely offer help without expecting something in return. Marcus started to protest, but she held up her hand. I was wrong, she continued. Sometimes people give simply because they see a need they can fill, because kindness is its own reward. She looked at him thoughtfully. You've reminded me of that, Marcus, and it's a lesson I needed. As she walked away, Marcus turned his face to the sun, feeling its warmth on his skin. 6 months ago, he had sat on a cold bench clutching a rejection letter, seeing only closed doors ahead. Now, through a chance encounter with a struggling student, through a simple decision to help without expectation of return, his entire path had changed. His phone buzzed with a text from Ellie. Mom says you might teach at my school this summer. Please say yes. Marcus smiled and typed back, already did. Get ready for math camp, kid. The cherry blossoms continued to fall around him, a gentle reminder that sometimes the most beautiful transformations begin with the smallest acts of kindness, like tutoring a struggling kid for free, not realizing she's the principal's daughter.